So you've probably reflected on this, but in these last few years, you've probably begun to reflect on sort of what have I learned, and am I different, and maybe would I do anything different? But what are the big lessons learned from your point of view? Operating a large organization.
Well, one of my key lessons I've learned, and I don't think I've mastered this, so I want to say that I'm not a master of it, is when to react and when not to react, right? I don't know if you've experienced this in your time, but there's a time for when you need to, somebody brings something to you and you need to take action right away. Yeah. And there's other times where you're like, that is very interesting, let me think on it, and then you're going to kind of sleep on it for a little while, or you're just going to put it on a parking lot somewhere and let it sit for a bit. So that knowing when to react and when not to react took time, and especially when to implement change and when not to implement change, like how to implement change. Big change needs to be kind of followed by a period of stability a little bit, because you got to kind of, if you keep throwing big change at people, it's overwhelming and you're going to lose people, you're going to see turnover. So I didn't get a master's in it, but I definitely got a bachelor's in change management, so to speak, during this whole process, how to manage that.
So a lot of folks that we deal with here at CCA, they sort of look at folks like you have gone through the process, and are there thoughts that you would have, and I know you're in peer boards, both in your industry and sort of in the geography. What do you share? What do you share that you learned sort of along sort of the decision to sell your company, and then kind of the lessons that you can share with other business owners that are considering maybe a liquidity event?
I'm a big advocate for peer boards because I believe that sharing your challenges with other leaders and they can help you with it is a massive tool for any leader. During that process, though, we have to go through annual strategic planning, right? We have to do our strategic plan for the year. Early on, I did this for 15 years. Early on, it was an annual strategic plan followed by, I also would pair it with like a 5-year long-term plan. I think in the early days, my long-term plans were a little too granular, a little too specific. I learned the long-term plan has to be more of a thought and of the direction that you're trying to take it. And I think what I learned was when I did my long-term plans, I had these like goals. We're going to hit this target. We would like to get into this market. We want to do these things. But I wasn't ever looking at it from a liquidity event kind of perspective, right? I wasn't looking at it from I'm looking to sell the business. And because I wasn't at the time, my intention was to take this for another 10, 15 years. Yeah. But the reality is you never know what's going to happen in those 5 years. And so I really feel like business owners need to, if they're going to create their long-term vision, their long-term plan, they still also need to mirror that to what it would look like if they did. Even if they're not planning to and they have no intention to and that's not the plan, you don't know 3 years into a 5-year plan what's going to change. But then beyond that, even if you're working towards that liquidity event, what are you doing? Ultimately, you're growing your EBITDA. You're trying to invest in top line growth in market, getting into new markets and making sure that you're not investing too much with one client, putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Those are kind of actions that are going to be good for any business, regardless of whether or not you're going to sell. So it's just going to make the business stronger for me to reinvest in the business if I choose not to go a liquidity event. But a lot of my early long-term vision plans were spent working too much in the weeds and too much on just making the business better, kind of subjectively and not financially. And I wish I had spent a little bit more time kind of steering in that direction. Because I think you told me, we were at a event where you were a panelist and there was the panel was talking. Yeah. And one of the things that hit home for me was you don't start selling your business 3 months before you sell your business. You start selling your business 3 years before you sell your business. Yeah. So if you're not taking your long-term vision and working it towards that plan, then you have to pivot midway and you don't have enough time to like get it where you need to get it once you make that decision.